health and well-being. So I guess many of you are here today because you have either signed up for Design4Impact or interested to sign up for Design4Impact, or just wanting to know more about the mental health space, especially for the area around for youths, right? So before we begin, we just want to do a quick poll just to find out how you're doing today. So if you can just give this QR code a quick scan, you can just let us know how you're feeling right now. Tired. Good. Yeah, I think a lot of us are feeling tired in this COVID period, getting in and out of Zoom meetings and Zoom chats and attending classes on Zoom. I think that certainly is a new change that we're trying to get used to. I see that some of you are feeling good, so that's great. Hope that you're excited to be here, to be listening to our panelists, to know more about mental health for youth. Excited, hungry, yes, almost dinner time. Motivated, nice, cool. I hope that you guys will be motivated to join us for Design4Impact. Great. So thanks for letting me know how you're feeling. Let's get on to talk a little bit more about for Design4Impact. Right. So over the next hour or so, our panelists of esteemed industry experts will shed light on concerns on challenge faced by youth in the area of mental health and well-being, which made much tougher by the pandemic. You'll also hear from individuals with lived experience to share with us their experience from their first-person perspective. As for me, I'm just here to tell you a little bit more about Design4Impact and perhaps convince you why you should join us on this journey. So a little bit more about Design4Impact. It started out last year during COVID-19. We realized that there's a lot of Singaporeans that wanted to contribute to the COVID-19 situation, but apart from the healthcare professionals that are serving on the front line, many of us did not have the resources, the network, or the know-how to do so. So Design4Impact was co-organized by MOHT Office of Healthcare Transformation, the National Council of Social Services, Design Singapore Council, and NUS Institute of System Science to offer the opportunity to many of you, social-minded innovators, to come together to pick up design thinking capabilities, to connect with mentors, resources, and a network to design, create sustainable community-owned solutions. Having it being taken place in the middle of COVID last year was certainly challenging, and researching on complex human issues from a safe distance certainly had its limitations. But we were so encouraged when we had a huge number of signups, 350 signups, and eventually 180 participants were selected from a strong field of diverse backgrounds. So that included people from the health and social service sector, community providers, policymakers, designers, IT professionals, and students. So the knowledge gained from that 4 weeks of workshops and real-world prototyping, participants developed solutions with a business model that enabled them to implement and scale. So today we have 3 solutions that are being piloted in the community, and hopefully we are still waiting to see if they do well, and if so, we would then push them out to more areas. And this year's Design4Impact is focused around mental health, specifically around mental health and wellness for seniors, caregivers, and youths. The COVID-19 pandemic has and is still creating a lot of uncertainty in the lives of every Singaporean, with many facing anxieties over health, finance, career, education, and relationships. Adjusting to life, the new normal certainly has taken its toll on mental and emotional well-being of many. This is especially the case for the vulnerable groups, and we really need your help to come up with fresh and bold approaches in order to reach out to these communities. So now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Mr. Ming Xiu, to tell us more about mental health challenges faced by youths. Ming Xiu is the founder and executive director of Campus Sci, a nonprofit organization aimed to promote mental health awareness and peer support among youths and young adults in school and workplaces through advocacy, training, support, volunteering, and interventions to create an inclusive and supportive community for youths with mental health issues. Ming Xiu is also the co-chair for Youth Alliance, interagency ground-up mental health committee comprising of government, healthcare, social service agencies, and institutes of higher learning, catalyzed by National Council of Social Services in partnership with National Mental Health Anti-Stigma Campaign Beyond the Label. Ming Xiu co-leads the efforts in addressing the stigma towards youth in mental health issues in IHLs through public education, outreach, and support. Right, so over to you, Ming Xiu.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. Yeah, so Ming Xiu, it's very lovely to actually have 174 of you guys with us today. Yeah, today we have 3 esteemed speakers and panelists with us. Before we start the panel discussion, let me just do a short introduction for our 3 esteemed panelists. Yeah, so first up we have Eric. Eric is actually the head of Resilience RSW Targeted Interventions for Shine Children and Youth Services. He is passionate about impacting the next generation and has been involved in various youth work initiatives, including mentoring, diversionary, street outreach, and mental health for more than 12 years. He is currently heading Resilience, a youth mental health service of Shine Children and Youth Services that seeks to normalize conversations around youth mental health, promote early identification and help seeking, as well as to leverage on technology to make services more available and palatable to youth. Next up, we have our second panelist, Ms. Yee Huei. Yee Huei is a senior case manager at Community Health Assessment Team Chat with the Institute of Mental Health IMH. After graduating with a Bachelor in Social Science Psychology from the National University of Singapore, Ms. Yee Huei has worked with young people and their families and subsequently in the mental health setting for 13 years. She also completed a Master's in Social Science Counseling with Edith Cowan University and has experience with individual counseling, marital work, and family work. She also completed her postgraduate diploma in social work and worked to contribute more in group work and community work. Last but not least, we have our youngest panelist on board, Tasneem. Tasneem is a third-year student at the National University of Singapore, NUS. She has a keen passion for youth mental health and has attempted to contribute to the community in various external events. As a peer caregiver to an individual diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, she has been diligent in providing the client with emotional and academic support. She has also been volunteering as a listener under the Global Youth Listeners Program, providing emotional support to adolescents struggling with issues relating to relationships, stress, and self-esteem issues. Yeah, so let us give a warm welcome to our panelists. All right, so next up, before we start, let's just go through some of the house rules for the session itself. Right, so for all, just a friendly reminder, all audience, please remain muted throughout the session. You can use the poll EV to participate actively in the polls and discussions throughout this 1.5 hour session. If you're unable to access poll EV, please send your questions and queries to our friendly Design4Impact 2 organizing committee on Zoom. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the segment itself. Do participate actively in our polls and discussion, and this session will be recorded. Just a short note, if in the event you feel uncomfortable during the session itself because of the topics that we're discussing, feel free to actually take a short break from this session itself. Yeah, next. Right, just wanted to reiterate what Brian has mentioned earlier. There were 3 challenge statements that we wanted to focus on for this Design4Impact 2 session. But for today's panel discussion, we will just focus primarily on our statement challenge 3, which is to facilitate youth's help-seeking behavior for mental health and well-being. Next. Right, so before we start, right, can you just go to POEV, and then I would like to know if you know where to seek help or resources when faced with mental health related issues. And later on, we will actually share with you guys your responses. Thank you. Right, so while all of you are doing the POEV, right, can we get our first panelist, right, Yee Huei from chat, right, to actually check with her, you know, what are some of the mental health issues that our youth or young people are facing nowadays, especially during COVID-19 itself. Yeah, Yee Huei.
Hey,
Take
hi,
it
Ming
away.
Xiu. Hi, everyone. And well, good to see so many young people coming in here today. Despite like a long day, I see like in the poll, people are feeling a bit tired, but yet, you know, motivated to come in and speak and hear more about, you know, what's happening in the mental health field. Yeah. So, well, COVID, well, for most people here, I guess COVID has really resulted in quite a lot of changes in our lives. So over the course, as we are speaking to young people, well, I guess I've spoken to quite a number of young people who, you know, there's also some disappointment. So there are young people that I've spoken to, they're quite disappointed that, you know, they couldn't be able to hold any, maybe things like graduation ceremony. There are also young people who are quite disappointed that their dreams could be dashed because of maybe certain sectors of their work. They are greatly affected, things like tourism, you know, travel industry, and even in terms of like, you know, part-time work, a lot of people are actually doing some part-time work here and there. Different sectors may also be affected. For instance, like our F&B may not be getting that much of a business anymore, and some young people therefore may be laid off from even part-time jobs. So I think quite a couple of these changes may have created more stress in people's lives, quite understandably. I guess also in terms of, you know, what's happening because of this COVID situation, some of the times in the past, we may be able to use certain coping strategies, which may not be that possible now. For instance, like in the past, it's very common, we could easily just get access to, you know, our friends, speak to them, or even go out with them. But with COVID's happening, it's getting a bit harder to maybe go out. There's restrictions here and there. You know, many different changes that brought about, and even things like, you know, maybe last time we could go to like gym, but sometimes, you know, gyms get affected. Different places that we want to go to, they all get affected. So all this really, I think, causes quite a lot of changes in our everyday lives. With things like changes to school, we have home-based learning, even work, you know, we work from home. We have to really adjust to, you know, different kind of situations, whether at home or even outside. And I've also spoken to quite a lot of young people that home setting sometimes may not be the most ideal for them. You know, they could be perhaps things like family situations happening at home, strained relationships. So as they, you know, feel they have to remain at home with maybe outside places not being so accessible anymore, it can get a little bit stressful to then be staying at home. Yeah.
Oh, thanks so much for that, Yee Huei. I can totally identify with what you've been sharing. Yeah, so at Campus Side, we also work with young people during this COVID period. Yeah, and a lot of them has actually feedback what you have mentioned, how it has affected them, you know, through home-based learning or even working from home arrangements. And how does this actually impact the mental well-being because of social isolation? And I think Eric, as a mental professional later, he can also share more with you guys. Yeah, so I think we have some responses from our participants. Yeah, I'd like to just share with you guys now, right? So with regards to the question that we had earlier, do you know where to seek help or resources when faced with mental health related issues, right? Wow, out of 186 of you, right, about 13% mentioned that, you know, you're fully aware of all the different mental health resources in Singapore. Well, that's awesome, right? And then about 30% of you mentioned that, you know, that's about, yeah, 31% of you are also aware of the resources that are available. 33% of you are neutral, you know, and then of course, 14% in between knowing the resources and not knowing, and 11% mentioned that you have no idea at all, right? So I think with regards to this responses that you guys actually keyed in, was so heartened to hear from you guys that, you know, majority, about 60% or even 75% of you, right, actually know where are some of the mental health resources that are available in Singapore, and that's really heartening, right? Because I think in the past, we hear from our young people that, apart from IMH itself, they don't really know, what are some of the other help that are available. Like, for example, the different social service agencies that provide mental health support and stuff. So we're just so heartened to hear that about 75% of you know, right? So for those about 23% of you guys who are not sure, later we'll share a bit more with you guys on some of the mental health resources that are out there that you can actually take away from this session itself. Yeah. Okay, next. Right. So our second question to you guys, what are some of the challenges or barriers our youth face in their help-seeking journey? Yeah. So if you could just go to ProEV, right, and just type in some of the barriers to help seeking that you know of, amongst your peers as young people, or even friends who are youth or young adults who are struggling in the workplace itself, right? Yep. And this will be actually created into a word cloud, right? And we will share with you guys the results and your responses later. So while you guys are doing that, in the next 5 minutes, can we just get Eric, right, to actually share from mental health professionals' perspective, right, to provide us with some insights to how actually young people navigate around the help-seeking system or journey in the mental health space. Yeah, Eric, would you like to share some stats that Shine has in terms of help-seeking behavior amongst young people? Yeah.
Sure, great. Thanks, Ming Xiu. Really appreciate it, and really happy to see so many young people being interested in this topic. So just very quickly to frame my response. So when we think about mental health, I suppose we now have embraced a much more expansive definition. In the past, perhaps mental health equals to mental illness. That's why, IMH, psychiatric treatment comes to mind very quickly. But even as we go about expanding our understanding, mental health, just as we don't think about health equals to avoidance or treatment of terminal illnesses, only health, there's so much to it. In the same measure, mental health, there's parts, how we deal with more common distress that we face on a day-to-day basis. Then mental health also includes, times where we encounter more significant life events that is unavoidable. Every one of us will go through, such as the loss of a loved one, very meaningful setbacks, all right? So you can just imagine, I just saw the news about an hour ago, Joseph Schooling and the other guy, Kwa, they will not be able to have their NS deferment being extended, right? So as athletes, they did not perform as well, and that very significant setback for anybody. And every one of us will definitely encounter some of these losses or things that require us to grieve, in our life. And then finally, of course, we may have people that develop an actual diagnosable mental health condition. So for each mental state that a person happened to be experiencing, we will require different kinds of help. Okay, yeah, and some of them require us to navigate around self-help, just reading forums or opinion pieces, engaging in relaxation exercises, or even turning to your peers and family members. That'll be quite adequate. And in fact, in our study with over 2,000 young person aged 12 to 25, turning to peers, all right, similar age peers remain the preferred option. More than 70% of young person will do that. Coming in second will be turning to family members. About 69% of young persons will actually do that. Thereafter, we will be thinking, okay, if using just our own informal support, if it's not quite adequate, we might need to turn to counselors or other professionals. So this is where in our study also, in terms of perception, about 50% of young people would say that they might be open, to call up a helpline. And about 55% would say that they could also be open, to seek help from a counselor, a social worker, a psychologist, or psychiatrist. This is where it gets very interesting. So that was the very self-perception, all right? When we measure it against actual behavior, so 70, 72, 73% of young person say that they might turn to their peers for help. 70% actually have done that before. So in actual behavior, they've done that before. Similarly, about 69% say that they would turn to their family members for help. About 67, 68% have actually engaged in that behavior before. Now, remembering, I mentioned earlier, about 50% say that they would turn to helplines, 55% to mental health professionals. That's perception, all right? Actual behavior, only 7% of young people has ever, get in touch with a helpline. Can be text-based, can be phone-based. And only about 14% has actually reached out to help from a mental health professional. So there is a huge variance between what they perceive they might do and what they actually did. So it appears that on the part of professionals, we need to really re-examine for ourselves. How do we come across as young people? Is it because our services are not accessible, or maybe not so approachable? Okay, for a variety of reasons, can be cost related, can be some people may have an impression the whole help seeking process with professionals can be very cold, can be very clinical, or can be very long. Or once I commit to it, I cannot withdraw, and that may actually translate into delayed help seeking or actually aversive kind of a behavior. So that's something I thought we need to be mindful about. Speaking to other young persons, they have also shared they're just not certain, how the professionals will come across. But it's something that's a bit hopeful for us as professionals, because there's this other group that we also studied as an option, right? So young persons say that while they may not be as keen to turn to a professional, they are a lot more keen to turn to a group of people that they consider as responsible, caring adults. They are not their friends or not their family members. Responsible, caring adults. So it could be your youth group leader, could be previously your school senior or things like that. Right? So that's something really for us to consider, even as professionals. How do we come across as a caring, responsible adult for the young persons? All right, so, Sarah has a question. So this is a study that's done internally within SHI. So as we move about various institutions, whenever before we start, we'll do a needs assessment. So it's actually an unpublished study, although we did do an abstract presentation in the recent Singapore Mental Health Conference 2021. Finally, before I pass the time back to Ming Xiu, an interesting stat that we also found out. So although there's good help-seeking behavior from towards informal networks, more than 65% of young persons indicate that should they ever have mental health needs, one of the options is actually doing nothing. 65%, right? Yep. And unfortunately, no, we didn't include that in the actual behavior. How many of them have actually done that before? Perhaps in our future study, but that also come across to us as rather jarring. While we don't have very clear insights, from our respondents at this point in time, it also tells us then that this notion about not doing something, not being proactive in seeking help for yourself, even at the very basic level of just engaging in relaxation exercises or talking to someone that you trust, can be a bit of a concern. Yeah, because that may contribute to deterioration of the condition, and for whatever reason there could be some resistance, or they feel that doing nothing is a better option than seeking help in any way. So that's something that we're still quite curious about. Yeah. So passing the time back to you, Ming Xiu.
Oh, thanks, Eric. I think that was really informative from the stats that you shared from Shine, right? I think what stood out for me was really the disparity between the perception of young people. 50% actually said they would seek help, but actually 7% actually sought help. Right, so I think that really coincides with one of the studies by SOS, Samaritans of Singapore, done in 2019, that they mentioned that actually amongst young Singaporeans, only 1/3, about 30%, or even 31.4% of young Singaporeans actually sought mental health professional help. Yeah, so I think really, and 2/3 don't actually seek help. So I think among Singaporeans itself of all age groups, about 1/4, only 1/4 will seek help. So I think that's something that we really need to work on. Yeah, but thanks so much, Eric, for sharing. Yeah. Yeah, so next up, can we also hear from Tasneem, from the perspective of a young person? Oh, yeah, so probably we can hear from Tasneem first before we share with you guys, the respondents, all of your thoughts on this issue, on some of the challenges and barriers of use in terms of your help-seeking journey. Yeah. Tasneem, would you want to share from your perspective as a young person? Thanks.
Hi, Ming Xiu. Thanks so much, Eric, for that really comprehensive explanation. I was quite surprised by the stats myself. Personally, for me, perhaps I could speak about the first time I realized I needed to seek help. And strangely enough, for me, it was a buildup of symptoms that were quite extreme, but it took me experiencing a panic attack for the first time for me to take the first step towards seeking any form of professional help. And that was just my school counselor. So for me, just a bit of background, I used to struggle with anxiety and panic attacks. And I've always been a little high strung as a child. I was very resistant to change and I was very easily overwhelmed. And my anxiety escalated to the point where it started to negatively affect my well-being at 16. So it started out quite small with physiological symptoms such as low immunity. I was very often sick. I kept having to take MC and taking days off school, which caused even more stress when I struggled to keep up. And I struggled a lot with insomnia, although I didn't know the underlying cause. And I also had difficulties concentrating in class. I was always physically and mentally exhausted. So that was during my O-level year. And when I actually got to the national examination, I threw up before each paper and I didn't manage to complete a single one. And thinking back at that time, it was quite traumatic for me. Despite all these symptoms, my parents, because I turned to them for information and advice, they perceived it as poor stress management. So I began to believe it was poor stress management as well. And it was a matter of just changing my lifestyle habits and just changing my mindset. And things only got worse in JC. I kept thinking it was just a matter of poor resilience on my end. So I just persevered and I just told myself to suck it up and keep going. So in JC, I think it got significantly worse. I was constantly in distress. The anxiety carried itself over. I was crying a lot, both in school, at home, and everywhere else. My mood was extremely low. And I also engaged in a lot of harmful self-destructive behavior. And it took me having a panic attack during a mathematics exam. So this was a school-based exam that determined whether you'll be promoted to JC2, which was quite high stakes. For me, that it occurred to me that I couldn't continue without seeking any urgent assistance. And even so, it took a lot of convincing on my teacher's end and also my counselor's end to convince my parents to let me seek any form of professional help in terms of a private psychologist, because time was tight taking the A-level, so I couldn't afford to wait months for an appointment at IMH. And we never really were aware of the nonprofit organizations either. So it took a lot of time, and there was a huge knowledge gap as well on my end. In terms of, I think what Yee Huei mentioned in terms of COVID-19, maybe I'll just speak on that as well. It definitely affected my help seeking, process, not so much the first step, but subsequently when I started to relapse in uni. I felt that the pandemic and the lockdown has sparked a lot more conversation about mental well-being and mental health, because maybe I can speak for the young people. I can't really speak for the NGOs and the leaders and the educators and the therapists, but for young people, for the first time, everyone was on the same side of the playing field. We were united by a common experience per se, which was being stuck at home. There's the blurring of the workspace and the rest space, and there was also the lack of personal space because we had to share our study spaces and our workspaces with our siblings, our parents, and if you have strict parents, they'll constantly be wondering what you're doing now that there's no longer a physical barrier. And sometimes some of us had to deal with hostile home environments, and our support systems outside of home, let's say our teachers, our friends, sometimes even our therapist could be a friend, was completely cut off because mental health services for a while were not considered essential services. And I noticed this when I volunteered as a peer supporter with an online initiative called Youth Listener. So I was providing free emotional support to other young people. And I noticed that there were a lot of overlaps in our conversations in terms of frustrations. So I remember a client from Italy, she shared with me how she would usually engage in art as a form of self-care and regulation, but all the stores had closed down, so she had no access to that whatsoever, and she felt a lot of inbuilt frustration. And I completely related with that, although she lives on the other side of the world. And although there was a consensus about the declining mental health in youths, and we all recognized that our mental health was declining and something needed to be done, the access to support services were completely cut off for a long period of time as it was not considered essential. And we also could not contact our teachers as easily because of the virtual medium. And telecounseling, even though it was introduced after a while, we felt that it wasn't the same, as privacy was a huge issue, especially if we share a limited space at home with our parents and our siblings. When your parents keep checking in on you and trying to find out what you're doing, your siblings that are listening into your conversation while they're doing their HBL, we found it very difficult to express our feelings freely and talk about our frustrations with the same freedom as compared to when we are sitting in the office with a counselor one-on-one, especially if the sibling or the parent or whoever's in the home environment is the source of the stress. We are less likely to open up about these issues. Thanks so much, Ming Xiu.
Oh, thanks so much, Tasneem, for that authentic sharing. Yeah, it takes a lot of courage to actually share what you've shared earlier. Yeah, and yep. So next up, right? Let's just go straight to the responses from all of you. the 198 of you. Wow. Wow. That's quite a lot of responses. Yeah. Thank you, guys. Yeah. And as we can see, I think the top challenge or barrier that our youth are struggling with in terms of the help-seeking journey, as you can see in the word cloud, is actually stigma, right? Then, of course, there are other factors like, for example, parents, which Tasneem has shared earlier, right? Trust issues, negative experiences, confidentiality issues, right? Peer pressure, not being one to be a burden, to their family members or their friends, expectations, societal stigma, right? Self-stigma, discouragement from peers, peer pressure, right? Cost, accessibility, fear of being judged, right? Accessibility, toxic environments, right? In the schools and in the workplace, grades, different consequences, right? Of help-seeking behavior. And I think all this, and I see one in Hokkien, paise, right? Yeah, so a lot of people are paise to seek help only when it is very detrimental, when, it really cannot really, then you go and seek help, right? I think that's quite a common sentiment that, as professionals, we hear from our young people, right? That really cannot really, then they will come and see the counselors and the psychologists or the psychiatrists. Yeah. So thanks, guys. Thank you so much for this insightful word cloud in terms of challenges and barriers of help seeking amongst our young people, right? We will share this. We will share this with the relevant agencies to help in terms of certain policy shifts in the future. Yeah. So thank you so much for that. So next up, can we go to the next segment, which is what are some of the existing, right, mental health resources or initiatives that you are aware of, right? So you could share this with us through the poll EV, and then later through the word cloud, we can actually share your responses with everyone, right? But in the meantime, we can get some of our panelists to actually share with you guys some of the community mental health resources that are actually out there, or certain policy shifts or recommendations from the government that is actually helping to improve the youth mental health space in Singapore, right? So as community partners, what are we doing to help reduce the barriers faced by our young people, right? So community partners could be NGOs, social service agencies, it could be educational institutions, right? It could be healthcare institutions like hospitals, like the polyclinics, and also education institutions like the schools, right? Tertiary institutions. And we also have youth sector organizations who work closely with young people, right? So are there any new trends or initiatives to further engage our young people, like some of you who are tuning in now? So before I pass the time on to Eric, Tasneem, or even Yee Huei, let me just share a bit of some of the new recommendations by the Interagency Task Force for Mental Health and Wellbeing in the past weeks, right? So as you know, recently, the COVID-19 Mental Health Task Force has been actually rebranded as the Interagency Task Force for Mental Health and Wellbeing, and this is led by Dr. Janu, together with different public agencies, like, for example, IMH, AIC, NCSS, and HPB, and also with the different ministries like MCCY, MOE, MOH, MSF, and some of the social service agencies who are involved in this task force itself. So based on the feedback that they got from the ground, from Singaporeans, and also from youth, right, like yourselves, they have come up with 3 broad recommendations, right? One is to actually have an overarching national strategy in terms of mental health and mental well-being to actually build resilience amongst our young people in Singapore. And this is done through one of the initiatives rolled out, policy rolled out by MOE recently, which is to actually have mental health curriculum being embedded in the CCE, citizenship and engagement, character and citizenship engagement lesson, yeah, for primary schools, secondary schools, all the way until junior colleges. Yeah, so all students, all the way from primary schools, will be able to learn what are some of the common signs and symptoms of mental conditions and how do they support their peers who might be in distress. And the second recommendation is actually to have a one-stop mental health platform, right, which is hosted by HPB in partnership with different social service agencies and public agencies, right, to actually have different help resources that are up there, right? So apart from this, this HPE portal, there are also existing resources, like for example, NCSS has this Beyond the Label Help Board, right, BEL, and then we have Utopia by National Youth Council, and we have the My Mental website by Temasek Foundation. So if you're a young person or you're a parent or educator and you want to find out more, you can just go to these websites for more information. And last but not least, we also have the third recommendation, which is to actually have a national mental health training competency framework, so that all mental health professionals would actually go through a standardized training to actually serve our young people better professionally. Yep. So those are more of the national initiatives and policy shifts in the youth mental health space. But probably we can get Eric to share more a bit about what's happening in the social service sector or agencies in terms of mental health, youth mental health services that are provided for young people. Yeah, Eric.
Great. Thanks, Ming Xiu. Yeah. So, like I mentioned earlier, oftentimes in the past we create mental health, mental illness. So IMH hospitals are the only places that we think of. But in the past couple of years, we have been having a lot more initiatives that are on the ground at the community level. So for Shine, our program is called Resilience. We are really sitting in the outreach, psychoeducation, early identification space. So some of the services we provide include mental health screening, and it's not a full assessment, right? We will not be able to identify if you happen to have a specific mental health condition, but what we are doing is to identify the mental state the young person happen to be in. Is it experiencing distress, or you're going through some mental health problems in this season, and with some kind of support you'll be able to do well, or we are suspecting that you may actually be showing signs and symptoms of a mental health condition and require further assessment. So this is one group of services that have come up, and currently we have about 4 agencies covering north, south, east, west in Singapore. Yeah, delivering something like that. So the aim is really to make mental health services a lot more accessible to young persons. The other class of initiatives that have been coming up and increasingly being made available to young person will be community level kind of intervention. So counseling services, or even some degree of a different range of therapy. And to my understanding, some agencies are also providing these services at no cost to young persons, because we know that cost has always been an issue for people either giving up or even not coming forward to help in the first place. So these are some of the initiatives that have been taking place on the ground, in terms of the traditional services. Apart from that, many agencies have also been exploring and leveraging on technology. How we can utilize technology. So earlier on, some of the things that have already been shared, there's BEL, right, under Beyond the Label. And for us within Shine, we have also partnered with local startup, right, to create an app called Milo, MYLOH, which means My Life of Hope. So inside this app, it's a local creation, so the language and all that is a lot more relatable. So we have AI-enabled chat tracks that talks about adulting, right, that talks about relationships, talks about common stresses that young persons experience, and through these chat tracks, we hope that we can provide more information and more perspective to young people going through these experiences. Apart from that, we also have things like a diary, mood tracker, journaling. So these are tools that the young person can also engage in, all right, to keep track of their own mental health. At the same time, should they be seeing a therapist or counselor, they can also share this information with the worker, such that we are better informed about the progress of this young person. Finally, within this app itself, we are also having a consolidated list of agencies the young person can seek help from, and we are doing our level best to tier them accordingly. If you are just experiencing light distress and you just need someone to talk to, you have no thoughts of ending your life or something more severe, there are some agencies you can turn to. Then in the event, if you feel that you're in a place that requires a lot more targeted kind of support and intervention, there are other agencies that you can turn to as well. We hope that through that, the young person won't be as unsure or unclear, because that whole landscape can be quite difficult for a lay person to navigate. So these are some of the initiatives that have taken place. Yet at the same time, we are also very intentional in wanting to study the outcomes and the effectiveness of these approaches. Truth be told, in terms of the literature at this point in time, the use of technology to support the mental health of an individual is inconclusive. Some studies show that, yep, it seems to have some net benefit. Some studies are unsure if there's an actual net benefit. So something for us, to be mindful about is also to go in with an evaluative mind to ensure that we are not just riding on the wave of technology, okay, but actually thinking through how to make technology work for the service user, rather than just adding on another feature that may turn out to be not as helpful. Yep, back to you, Ming Xiu.
Oh, thanks, Eric. Well, that's a wide spread of resources in the social service sector that you've mentioned. Yeah, so just now when you were talking about, leveraging on technology, yeah, just to share with you guys that the Youth Alliance, the agency ground-up mental committee that we're co-leading Campus and Touch community service with Beyond the Label and NCSS, we're working with MOHT, the Ministry of Health Transformation Office, on this new U version of mindline.sg. Right, so this mindline.sg, if you can go Google it, it has actually an assessment component. So if you feel that you know someone who's in distress or who wants to get assessed, right, you can actually go on there. They have a free assessment tool there. Then thereafter, they also have an AI chatbot called WISA, and they can the WISA chatbot can actually talk to you. And if you really need certain resources, intervention services, like for example, just now Eric was saying, different social service agencies are providing such services and interventions, they can also refer you to such services. Yeah, so Eric was mentioning also, right? Mindline, yeah. So Fikri, it's MIND, Mind, and then LINE, mindline.sg. Yeah. Yeah, correct. Thanks, Eric, for that. Yeah, so apart from that, Eric was saying that, Shine is part of these 4 agencies that are doing this CREST Youth Program, right? So it's actually a new youth mental pilot program by Agency for Integrated Care, AIC, and the different social service agencies and MOH. So next year, Campus is also embarking on this. So much to learn from our partners in the sector like Shine. Yeah, so there are so many help services that are available out there in the social service sector. Can we also hear from our friends in the healthcare sector? Yee Huei, Chat is part of IMH, right, which is also part of MOH. Yeah, so Yee Huei, you want to share a bit more in the healthcare sector? What are some available resources, like for example the GPs, the polyclinics, and the hospitals? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So like I think most people will be aware. In terms of maybe more of the acute settings, there's always hospitals that you can go to. So as I hear Tasneem just now talking about, sometimes waiting for symptoms to get stronger, a bit tougher to manage, then we'll go. So that's the point in time where usually people go to A&E lah. Of course, if you can actually seek help a little bit earlier, so that conditions doesn't have to advance until there. You can also seek help at places like polyclinics and get earlier intervention. Yeah. Of course, Chat itself, we are out in the community and we do welcome young people to speak to us also. So we do like mental health checks for young people over now, and thanks and no thanks to COVID, I guess, we now have more avenues of young people contacting us. So on top of last time, we used to see people in face-to-face in our chat hub located at Skate Building. Now we also do talk to people over the phone. So we do phone assessments, we do Zoom assessments, and we also have our web chat. So web chat is an online text-based service where we speak to young people so they can hop over into the room. Chatting room, they talk to us. So this is when people sometimes they may have distress. So as and when it can be on a very needs basis, they go onto web chat and they can talk to any one of my colleagues at the other end, and we can speak to you and address the distress there and then. Yeah.
Thanks so much for that, Yee Huei. Yeah, so Chat actually is amazing, right? We've heard so much great things from Chat. They actually have a hub, right, at Scape. Yeah, so if young people, you would like to check them out, it's actually just at Scape, right smack at Somerset, right? Yeah. Okay, yeah, so thanks so much, Eric and Yee Huei. And we see some of the comments from the chat group, some of them wanted to find out more about the resources and all. We will share with you all these resources that we have talked about at the end of the session itself. Yeah, so thank you guys. Yep, so next, right, let's just take a look at the responses from you guys on the question we had earlier. Right, so what are some of the existing mental resources or initiatives that you are aware of? And we see Alliance Caregivers. Not sure if you meant Caregivers Alliance Limited, which is a social service agency that serves or train caregivers to actually provide support to people with mental health conditions. Yeah, so that's one of that. One of the social service agencies that provide them. And of course, we have Singapore Association for Mental Health, right? And we have Samaritans of Singapore, SOS, that does primarily suicide prevention, intervention, and post-intervention work, right? And then, of course, we have CHAT, Silver Ribbon Singapore, so on and so forth. And not forgetting our healthcare friends, the hospitals, most of them would have a psychiatric department there, or even a psychologist, right? For therapy and all that, apart from medication and all. And of course, polyclinics, if you need a referral, right, you can actually go to the polyclinics. GPs would also, most of the GPs are also trained in psychiatry. Yeah, so these are some of the resources that we hope it'll be helpful for you guys if you know of someone who might be in distress or struggling with a mental condition in the healthcare sector or even in the social service sector, right? Yep, so next up, right, we will move on to the next segment, right? The next question. This is for you guys. What are some ideas that can help to fill the existing gaps or areas of opportunities that you guys have mentioned earlier? So just now, I think in the word cloud, we've seen so much of your responses, right? Like for example, stigma, confidentiality issues, trust issues, feeling paiseh and all that. So from all the different issues that you guys have mentioned in terms of barriers to help seeking, yeah, feel free to actually put in poll EV. What are some of the potential recommendations or solutions that you think might be helpful to fill the existing gaps or areas of opportunities? Who knows, these ideas can help you in terms of forming a team for the Design for Impact 2 session after this webinar. Yeah. Right. So while we are waiting for your responses in poll EV for the next 5 to 10 minutes, right, let us just hear from our three panelists, right? If you had the ability to change one thing to help our young people or youth in the mental health seeking journey, what would it be? Yeah, so probably we can start with our youth first, Tasneem. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Ming Xiu. Okay, speaking from the perspective of a student, maybe we should start with education first, because that, as Eric, Yee Huei, and yourself mentioned, Ming Xiu, there's a lot of opportunities available to seek help in the social service sector, many of which I wasn't even aware of. So I learned something today, and I hope everyone else did as well. I was, because also for a lot of young people, the root of stress lies in perhaps the way schools are run or the expectations related to academic performance, or sometimes peer pressure, peer relationships, especially during the adolescent age, where getting the approval of peers is very important, and feeling isolated or left out can cause a lot of distress. So something maybe I could suggest, I'm not sure whether this is feasible in the secondary schools and the primary schools, but perhaps starting with the universities, perhaps there could be more safe spaces around. For example, we do have a net room and a pit stop in NUS. That's where you can speak to one of the peer student supporters, which is also my CCA, and also the staff at the Office of Student Affairs who do support students who are facing emotional distress. And there's also a net room and a room where you can engage in self-care activities such as arts and crafts or just art jamming. I was wondering if it would be possible to perhaps include these small safe spaces in faculties as well. It could be perhaps I wouldn't call it a panic room, but maybe a break room where you can have, there's a small little room where you can have like pillows, cushions, just a quiet space where students can just relax or maybe just recharge before they move on to their classes. And also reevaluate how we assess achievement in education. I mean, now there's a big component in university called ClassPad, where you're assessed on how many times you speak in class. And for some students, that can cause a lot of anxiety because that's a big part of your grade, but not everyone is comfortable speaking in a public setting. Also in orientation, being pro-social or being loud or gregarious or hyper is encouraged when not all students are capable or comfortable with revealing that part of themselves. So maybe it boils down to leadership, maybe setting the expectations that everybody is different, everybody warms up and grows at their own pace, and we should all be more inclusive or maybe tap on different strengths for different students. Thanks so much, Ming Xiu.
Thanks so much, Tasneem, for that. Yeah, so I think as you mentioned that NUS has this peer supporters program, right? And you actually have a safe space for young people who want to seek basic emotional support, right? From trained peer supporters. I think just to share with our participants, a lot of our institutes of higher learning, the local universities like NUS, NTU, SMU, SUSS, so on and so forth, and also our local polytechnics and ITs, most of them would have a peer support program or trained peer supporters in the IHLs to provide basic emotional support for young people. And these are supervised by the counselors in the schools itself. Yeah, so if you know of someone or a young person in the IHL who really needs help, you can also refer them to the peer support groups. Also, MOE has also shared that by the end of 2021, right, most MOE schools, primary schools, secondary schools, and JCs would also have a basic peer support structure, whereby they will have a peer support group or trained peer supporters to be the eyes and ears on the ground to support youth who are in distress or children who are in distress. Yeah. Yeah, just a quick reminder, right? A gentle reminder that, later we would have a Q&A segment, right? But feel free to actually put your questions in the Q&A chat box. Yeah, we see quite a lot of you actually inserted your questions in the chat box. Yeah. But if you could you put it in the Q&A chat box so that we can actually get you guys to upvote for those questions that you want our panelists to actually answer. Yeah, we see quite a lot of responses now. Yeah, feel free to do so in the Q&A chat box. Thank you. Yeah, so I think we've heard from our young person, right? So as professionals, Eric and Yee Huei, would you want to share more? Yeah, thanks.
Sure. I can go first if Yee Huei is okay with that. Yeah, so just building on what Tess has mentioned, one of the key strategies that we are adopting in Shine is to enable any young person, as well as caregivers that we come along, that we have interaction with, to strengthen their mental health literacy. The whole idea is to make mental health relevant for everybody, and basic knowledge, identifying signs and symptoms, basic awareness of what are the helplines, resources available to be made known to everyone. Okay, so in a bit of a attempt at a slogan, everyone mental health literate, everyone mental health enabled. What do we mean by that? If you happen to come across someone that may be in some form of distress, you are able to offer some degree of wise counsel, just to encourage the person, to get the kind of support you might need. Because let's use health as a nice form. If you happen to see someone having a headache, having a bit of a sore throat and cough, you kind of know intuitively what we would suggest to the person. Drink some honey, take certain kind of standard medication that will alleviate the symptoms, or maybe you need to rest a bit more and not have that much late night. But as we move about, we notice for mental health concerns, even as basic as things like stress, suddenly we are kind of stunned. We might not even know what to tell the person, and there's always a concern that we don't want to give suggestions that are inappropriate. So that we thought that it could be a sense that indication that we are not familiar with this topic. Hence, we are so guarded in sharing it, and it could also be a revelation of our limited knowledge. And that is actually what we found. So in the same study that we did with many young persons, actually the encouraging thing is about 85% of young persons feel that mental health is a topic that is relevant for them. All right, so awareness is good, wonderful. 50% noted that they have the knowledge to have good mental health, which means 50% don't. But only 30% stated that they have the adequate skills to engage in good mental health. So if we talk about things like, have good sleep hygiene, right? The person might know that, yes, I need to have good sleep hygiene to, have good mental health, but I don't know how to have good sleep hygiene. So moving ahead, going back to the question that Ming Xiu asked earlier, I thought one of the things that we might want to work on then is to enable our young person to have adequate knowledge and skills, not just the awareness anymore, but adequate knowledge and skills to actually help themselves to have good mental health.
Oh, thanks so much for that, Eric. Yeah, like you mentioned, nowadays our young people, are so woke, right? They are so aware about different mental health related issues, and also on other issues like sustainability, future of job, and everything that they're concerned about, right? So I think the next step, like you mentioned, is really how do we equip them with the relevant skill sets and knowledge so that they can be the catalyst of change, like Tasneem, right? To be youth mental health advocates in the space. Yep. Yeah. So next up, we can have Yee Huei to share with us. Yee Huei, thank you.
Yeah, I resonate a lot with what Eric is talking here about the mental health literacy. And I get reminded of Tasneem just now talking about how, waiting for symptoms to get, stronger before then turning to, hey, I need help. And also got reminded just a couple of days back, I was speaking to a young person over the phone. All the symptom signs are all there. And frankly speaking, he has been quite aware and suspecting that something wasn't quite right. But as we ended the conversation, then he talked about how, I didn't come forth much earlier because I was just wondering, like, is this bad enough that I come and actually speak to someone, like even a professional? So I think literacy is really one thing that, in at least in the helping sector, helping professional sector is something that we can work on. So over in chat, we have then took on this to maybe work something out for young people to get more knowledge and skills to either identify or to be able to help themselves. So one thing we have done is about creating e-learning modules for young people. So if you look out at Chat's Facebook page, you would be able to see that we have put up a couple of new e-learning modules. So these are about, could be things like, short things. Is this depression or is this not? Is this something that is just normal blues? Also, we noticed that young people generally find it much easier to speak to their peers. So one of the things that I think is helpful is then engaging our young people themselves to then look out for young people. And I think very heartening to see that a lot of young people actually want to be helpful for their peers. Yeah. So one thing that we have also then created as part of our e-learning modules is for young people to know, like, hey, how do we then approach people to talk about mental health? Because sometimes people could get a bit like wary, like if I say certain things, is it going to make things harder for people? What if I make things worse? Then how? Yeah, so I think in terms of literacy, these are some of the things that we have created lah. And hopefully that helps.
Thanks so much for that, Yee Huei. Yeah, and when you talk about mental health literacy, I think it's so important, right, to equip our young people with the right knowledge to identify certain signs and symptoms of mental health conditions and how to practical peer support tips. And that's why we've been working with Chat. Yeah, since our founding in 2016, for Campus Side, we've been working with Chat and other social service agencies to actually train young people as peer supporters so that once they are trained through a 5-week to a 12-week training, then they can go back to their schools and their workplace to actually form communities to provide peer support for their friends and peers. So now that we have heard from all the different panelists, right, on some of the ideas or wish lists that they want to actually see in improving the help-seeking journey of our young people, let us hear from our 181 participants on some of their responses. Are you all ready? Yeah. Okay, can we see the, okay. So we have some of the ideas from our respondents. Yeah, so some ideas are like, for example, providing basic emotional support, right? So it's peer support, mental health first aid. I see public, how does the public, the school, the workplace actually help in terms of providing support for young people, right? And also meltdowns, how do we actually educate? Yeah, that is about the mental health literacy part, right? How do we educate our young people more on mental health literacy? How do we provide more positive and encouraging support for young people? Mentoring, that's awesome, right? Mentoring, how do we actually mentor our young people in different areas of mental health? Visible, I see it's quite visible. It's it's quite, yeah. So, right, how do we make all these resources and help seeking opportunities more visible? Clinics, right? How can we actually provide more help in terms of these clinics and different groups coming together? How can we be a more compassionate society as a community? Psychoeducation, I see a lot. Conversations, open conversations, right? How do we actually have non-judgmental conversations on mental health? And we're seeing this over the past few years, so many conversations are going on. Like, for example, the Youth Conversations by National Youth Council in 2018. And, fast forward 3 years, now we have quite a lot of national conversations on mental health, right? And then, of course, how do we normalizing help-seeking behavior? How do we actually validate our emotional experiences from our young people? Yeah, and how do we actually make, I see headache. Is it because there's too many, too many responses to this? Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much, guys. We see so many of these good ideas that you guys have actually come up with, and we hope that you can actually pilot or prototype these ideas for the upcoming Design for Impact 2 sessions itself. Yep. So next up, right, we have our Q&A segment, and I see quite a lot of questions that has already been upvoted by all of you, right? So let me just go to the Q&A segment. Okay, so to the panelists, right? This question has the most votes. It's by Kelvin Wong. So hi panelists, bullying and cyberbullying is very common in school now, but the victims are very reluctant to tell their parents or do anything about it. Lest the bullies take revenge and it becomes worse. So kids these days don't go and tell teachers like we used to do in the old days. Any advice for students who are suffering in silence? Yeah. Eric, Yee Huei, Tasneem, feel free to jump into the question. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, Kelvin, for that question. And I would just respond by saying I think that it is not only common now, it has always been common. I believe it was Singapore Children's Society who did a study more than 10 years ago. And in their study, it was unfortunately more than 80 or 90% of students in Singapore would have experienced at least one episode of bullying in their schooling life by the time they complete secondary school. Yeah, so it could be, it is something that seems to be very common, and in part it could be the immaturity of our younger selves, things that we say or do, we are not as sensitive, but the person on the receiving end actually takes it as a form of bullying. So coming back to the question, what is the suggestion given that many young persons are experiencing this? So 2 to 3 things. Number one, I think, is coming back, helping our young person to have their own resilience and regulation. Okay, yeah, being able to handle criticisms, difficult situations by yourself, and this could include things like your own emotion regulation, the way you reframe very difficult circumstance, because through the course of life, we will always encounter such situations. Sometimes it's overt, sometimes covert, sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's actually unintentional. The person doing it might not even know. We just happen to have very different worldviews, right? So that's one. Number 2 is then for us to see how to put ourselves in the equation of a solution as well. I was just watching this Korean drama recently. I'm not sure any of you came across DP. So it talks about the very severe bullying culture in the Korean conscript military. Right to the end, there are people who took their life, there are people who went on rage and ended the life of others before they took their own life. And the last episode, was titled Onlookers. Yeah. And when I first started out in my social service practice, I remember giving a talk on bullying as well. And oftentimes we think about the perpetrator and then the victim. But actually there's a third group of people, and they are the largest group, which is the bystander. Yeah, so if each one of us takes some degree of responsibility, and if we notice something, we can just check in with the person that we perceive might be the victim, or we may just sometimes reflect to the person that we might perceive as the perpetrator. Sometimes it's a lack of awareness that activities they engage in can be coming across as a bullying behavior. Perhaps that can be very helpful, all right, for all of us involved, rather than thinking, who is that sacred angel in the sky that is going to take responsibility for everyone. If each one of us take up some degree of responsibility. So going back to my own experience, I still remember very clearly when I was in Sec 3, the person sitting next to me is a very vocal individual, extremely strong, opinionated, and he was so vocal, that he was beginning to put me down without knowing. So 2 things happened. One, my friends who noticed that came in to check in with me and see what am I doing. But as a young person, as a male also perhaps, want to appear strong, I was brushing away, some of their concerns. But good thing for me, I have another classmate. She went to sound out the teacher, and the teacher just came to have a bit of a conversation with us, and that was very helpful. So at the end, we just have to come to a conclusion. The person sitting next to me was just so unaware that he was coming across so strongly, to the point that I was feeling being put down. So I hope that this will be then an example of how bystanders, instead of being bystanders, you can then become active participants in this whole situation. Not sure if Tess or Yee Huei, you have anything you might want to add on.
Oh, thanks for that, Eric. Yeah, I watched DP. That 6 episodes was intense. Yeah, it's really all about bullying. And like you mentioned, how can we actually reduce the bystander effect? I mean, we learned this in psychology, Introduction to Psychology 101, right? Yeah, as social workers. Yeah, so yeah, really, how can we actually get the society to actually stand up like to this bullies, right? I think this is one major thing we can work on. How about Tess or Yee Huei? Do you have anything to add on to what Eric has just shared? Yeah. If not, it's mine also.
I was looking at Tess' nonverbal cues just now. I was thinking, I think she wanted to say something when Eric was saying. Yeah, I think as Eric was saying, what resonates with me was that the thought of, hey, you know, if and this was also a comment by someone who put into the chat box the comment that when people are bullying are bullied, it can be quite traumatizing. And many a times then in the midst of this bullying, this person can experience quite a couple of changes in himself or herself. So I think as in line with what Eric is saying here, if this is someone that we know who has gotten bullied, and if we can then sort of identify that something about this person is not quite the usual self anymore, because in terms of behaviors or emotions or things like that, there will be changes that we notice. Then can we use ourselves then to maybe be the helper for this person? It doesn't have to be about offering like a real like big solution just to stop the bullying. It need not be something like that. It could be just example like just lending a listening ear, or just reaching out to the person and say, hi, hey, I noticed that you haven't been quite yourself. How have you been? Are you okay? And I think it's really about just conveying the concern for the person and letting the person feel that they're being heard, understood, and maybe someone is concerned for me. And I think that opens up more opportunities for the person to actually, speak up and, reach out for help. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that, Yee Huei. With regards to what you mentioned, really, being present and being there to actually listen to what the person has to share, it's so important, right? As a peer supporter or as a person, right? As a friend or a family member. Yeah, and I also see some comments in the chat group that says that, bullying can potentially actually lead to trauma related issues amongst our young people. And to the participants who are tuning in, if you know of someone who's struggling with trauma, or if you're a young person, you're an educator or a helping professional who wants to learn more about trauma-informed care, right? Feel free to actually go to this safecircle.sg. So it's actually 7 social service agencies. So it includes Campus Side, it includes Singapore Children's Society, Singapore Association for Mental Health. Oh, thanks, Eric, for putting in the group chat. And other social service agencies. So the 7 agencies have come together to come up with a national curriculum on trauma-informed care so that we can actually better support our young people with the trauma-related issues. Yeah. So next up, we have another highly voted question by Damim Ansar. All right. It says currently there are a lot of mental health initiatives which make the mental health support space seem to be a bit fragmented, and our young people may not know who to refer to with such vast variety of available options. With organizations such as Chat and Resilience, I think he meant Shine, right? Be open to work together to consolidate resources in a one-stop platform for youth, young people, or children. Who, in your opinion, should take the leading role in consolidating this issue? Yep. Any of you want to take this? Yeah.
Yeah, if Tess and Eway don't mind, because this is a topic that I have been discussing with my team. And truth be told, no one will take up this because it's something that's so massive, which also means any one of us here can take this up. So for the past 2 batches of interns that have been with us, we have been starting to map out, which are the agencies that are more at the preventive care level, which level, wellness level, which are the agencies that are more at the intervention treatment, and then which are the agencies that are more in recovery. And just as we were doing this, I think a couple of weeks ago, I got an email from a student in their own project have self-initiated something like that. So I suppose all of us are aware that this phenomenon, this current situation can be a bit distressing for those that want to seek help but don't know where to go. And if we have 1 or 2 encounters that we press on the wrong doorbell, although all the agencies will always have this open door, no wrong door policy, but for the young person can be, oh no, I went to the wrong place, I may not want to try again. So we are trying to map something like that out, okay, so that it can be easier for the young person. So if you happen to be interested, later I will put my email in. Be happy to connect. But having said that, at the same time, sometimes when I look at the vast, range of services available, it is quite heartening and it is important as well. And why do I say that? While we want to coordinate and make it easier, for the young person to seek help, I thought that it's still very wonderful to have many different agencies and many different initiatives, serving various population. Why is that so? We are returning the power of choice back to the individual. So a lot of young persons have also shared with us, they are glad that actually they see a whole range of services out there. Can be confusing, but they're just glad that there's a whole range out there. Why is that so? They don't want to be funneled to one specific place. They don't want to be told this is exactly where you should go. Just having that power of choice, that autonomy is very crucial for any help seeker as well. So we can find a good balance to ensure that in the situation where there's a whole range of choices, they are still able to navigate quite skillfully. That's my response.
Thanks, Eric. Just a bit on what Eric has mentioned, and in response to Damim's question, right? It seems that there are so many services that are out there, right? But if you want a directory, right, to go and see, what are some of the services that are out there, a consolidated one, you can actually go to the National Council of Social Service website, NCSS. So they are actually the national body that governs all the social service agencies in Singapore, about 450 of them. Yeah, so you can actually go there, and then there are different mental health agencies that provide social different resources there through interventions, through peer support, and all. You can also go to the Beyond the Labor Help Board, to go through that. And from what I know, right, the Youth Mental Wellbeing Network, by the different ministries like MSF, MOH, MOE, we're also trying to consolidate, and MCCY, we're also trying to consolidate the different resources that are out there, so that we're able to actually point the young people to the various help services most appropriate to them. Yeah, so for those who really need to go to the healthcare services, they can go to CHAD or IMH or even the hospitals and the polyclinics. For those who probably are low risk or moderate risk, they just need some counseling and casework. They can go to social service agencies like Shine and other social service agencies. Yeah, so you can also check that out in the future, which is coming up soon. Yeah, but in the meantime, you can go to the NCSS website. Yeah, hope that helps. Just mindful of time, we have about 8 more minutes before the end of the Q&A. Yeah, so Damim, hope that answers your question. We have the next question by Safia, right? She says, thank you, Tess, for the suggestion. I think that sounds like a good suggestion, as some of the students' stresses stems from the family environment and living arrangement. If we could explore the idea of this breakout room at RC or FSC or CC, it would be a good avenue for youth to have a platform for self-care. Yeah, so I guess this question would be for Tess, right? Yeah, Tess, would you want to respond to this question? Thanks.
Thanks so much, Ming Xiu. Thanks, Safia, for your question. I'm actually a little confused because I thought it was Ming Xiu. I thought it was more of a comment rather than a question. I'm not really sure. Safia, would you mind clarifying what is it? Was it a question or a comment? Because like the way I see it, it was more of a suggestion and a comment.
Yeah, no worries. While Safia is actually elaborating on that, probably we can go to the next question, and then Tasneem, you can actually respond to that. Yeah, thanks Safia, and thanks Tasneem. Right, the next question is by David Teo. Hi, I noticed one of the reasons or barriers that is preventing young people from seeking help is academia. So when the education and career system is so competitive, will young people be able to disrupt the studies to seek help? The parents of these young people will continue to push their children to perform in the system to succeed because of the economic demands of the society and country. Yeah, would any of the panelists want to take this question? Yee Huei, you want to have a go at this? Yeah.
Sorry, can I clarify? So the question is, will young people be able to disrupt their studies to seek help?
Yeah, correct. So like, for example, taking an LOA, a leave of absence of sorts, and then...
Yeah. I guess depending on the situation, we have been seeing young people who actually, self-initiated, even like taking a leave of absence from school. There are also, depending on situations, sometimes it's the school who advise the student to take a break. So I think it really depends. If it is something that's going to be helpful for the person in the midst of then the studies, because they probably have to address other health concerns first before the studies can carry on. So I guess that's the thing that's important to do it before they go back to the studies. Otherwise, if health is then a concern, they may not actually be able to reach their fullest potential, even if they are, just pressed on with their studies. Yeah, so I think, yes, that's already happening in the field. But I'm not quite sure whether this is, answering the question, that David had.
Yeah, thanks, Yee Huei, for that. Yeah, so oh yeah, David said thank you. Yeah, so I guess that answers Yee Hui's David's question from Yee Huei. Yeah, so currently there's young people can actually take a leave of absence if they're from the different IHLs, the unis, the polys, or even the ITEs if they have certain if they would like to or even gap years and stuff. Yeah, I think Safia has already made some clarifications in the Zoom chat itself to test. Yeah, so with regards to Safia's comments, she was wondering if the initiative, the breakout room held at, I think she meant the NUS peer support room, held at community settings can be more feasible for use in community settings like RCCCs and all, rather than it's just based in the schools or the IHLs. Yeah, Tess.
Thanks so much, Ming Xiu. Thanks, Safia. I'm sorry, but I think I might need to direct this question to either yourself, Ming Xiu, Eric, or Yee Huei, because with regards to feasibility in NGOs, I don't think I'm qualified to provide my 2 cents. Is it possible, like in campus?
Sure.
Yeah, is there like a breakout room, like a calm down room, a regulation room, or in chat or in Shine? Is it possible?
Yeah, so I'm not at discretion to disclose too much, but there have been conversations around this. Yeah, where can we have, in community spaces where a young person can go to this place for a bit of a respite. I think that's already happening for some population, in the perhaps the single parents that are very high stress and they need some respite, right? So we have been having conversations with different parties to have something like that more available. And I note that, Safia mentioned very specifically rather than just school-based, and that I think relates to this point about could be in part stigma, could be in part choice. Yeah, because we do come across a lot of young people that mention that they always want alternatives to school-based services for an assortment of reasons. So yes, that is very possible. Talks are underway, and hopefully in a couple of months' time, we will have some good news to share with everyone.
Oh, thanks, Eric. Good to know that. Yeah, and also to respond to Safia's question, right? Part of the Youth Mental Wellbeing Network, right? Some of the projects are also looking into this to actually have community spaces, like you mentioned, the RCs, the CCs, or even hawker centers and stuff, or cafes, to actually open up for such safe spaces. So I think you can keep a lookout for the project implementations for the Youth Mental Wellbeing Network that will be coming, I think, end of this year or next year. Yeah, or even keep posted from Shine's talks, right? From what Eric has mentioned. Yeah, so it's just a way of time. We have 2 more minutes before the end of Q&A, right? Let's just take one final question, right? Then we can pass it on to Brian, right? Right, so our last question for today, do you agree, panelists, with MOE's decision on increasing teachers' mental health literacy and involvement for the students? Teachers are already very burdened with their own administrative work, and their own mental health is already at stake, let alone supporting their own students. Yeah, would any of you want to take this? I can add on to that also. Yeah, thank you.
Maybe I can share. So I think mental health literacy is for everyone, not just for a specific group of person. I guess it's more about the process of how it's being done rather than the result of, yes, I do want certain groups of people to do it. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Yee Huei. Eric, Tess, do you want to chime in on this?
I agree with Yee Huei. I think we need to find a way that will not overload the teachers. Yep, they're already taking on. I totally agree with the comment, and I think it starts from every individual.
Yeah.
Just as basic ailments, health ailments, we don't always need to rush to the GP. Otherwise, we have a GP overload of the system. Perhaps the more common mental distress. If each one of us can give support to each other, all right, then we don't need to really overwhelm or overload the teachers with yet more and more things. Yep.
Yeah, just to build on what Eric and Yee Huei has mentioned, it is really important that teachers don't take the full brunt looking after the emotional well-being of our students. And we know through our different conversations with educators that, on top of their overwhelming workload in teaching, right, administrative work and all, they're already very burdened. So we hope that it's a whole of society approach where we can actually not just get the educators, but also helping professionals from the healthcare sector or the social service sector to actually support our educators in supporting our young people in their emotional or mental well-being. Yeah, hope that answers your question. Thank you guys. Thank you all of you for all your questions. Unfortunately, we are unable to actually respond to all your questions during this session itself. But fear not, right? What you can do is that for these questions that you guys have actually posed in Q&A, right? Or if you have any other questions after this session, you can actually email us at design4impact2@gmail.com. Okay, design4impact2@gmail.com, and then we will respond to your questions after this session. Yeah, so before we end off today's session, right, can we have each of the panelists, share with us, what are some of the key takeaways, that you hope our participants can take for their Design for Impact 2 journey in the next few months? Yeah, thank you. Eric, want to go first?
Sure. Just very quickly, I hope that whatever that we choose to do, let's continue to put the young person in the center of it all. Right? There can be so many interesting ideas, use technology, have 24/7 availability services, whatever it is. But let's bear in mind, put the young person in the center and let the services be designed around the needs of the young person.
Oh, thanks for that, Eric. Putting the young person, person-centric, right? In terms of all the things that we do. Yeah. Yee Huei, you want to go next?
I second that. So maybe not in terms of what we think should happen, but let the voices of what needs to be done. So it's based on needs basis, guide us in what we then create for the population here.
Thanks for that, Yee Huei. So client-centric, which is also person-centric. Thanks for that. And last but not least, let us have Tess to share with us from a youth perspective. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Ming Xiu. From a youth perspective, I would say thank you so much for doing what you do. At the end of the day, giving and educating, I mean, we have come a long way in terms of youth mental health, especially in the past year. It's really been incredible the work people have done and the change people have tried to instill in society. We still have a long way to go, but just already thank you for doing what you do. And we'll keep fighting, we'll keep educating, we'll keep inspiring, just keep doing what you do. And also, I think at the end of the day, mental health is really for everybody. It's not just limited to just the therapists or the counselors or the teacher counselors or the psychiatrists or the healthcare professionals. It's for everyone. Everyone's mental health matters. Everyone should have access to help seeking service, whether it's youth or other groups. And it's not just about the actual service itself, it's also about the people who facilitate, the people who create, the people who educate, the people who inspire, and the people who speak as well. Speak up for others. Thank you so much, Ming Xiu.
Thanks, Tess, thanks Yee Huei and Eric for your key takeaway. And as for mine, as the moderator, I just want to reiterate this: there's no health without mental health. Yeah, so if we can all, as a society, from our different roles, to actually help one person who's struggling with mental condition, I think that will go a long way. Yeah, so on that note, right, we would really like to thank our panelists for the time and insightful sharing. And before we go, right, you see the screen. We will also hope to hear from you guys on some of the key takeaways for today's session, right? You can go to PoEV and then share with us some of the key takeaways that you have. So while you're doing that, we have also prepared a list of helplines and resources, which we will also send to you after the webinar itself. Yeah, so next slide, right? We would have our helplines and resources for you. Yeah, you can either take a screenshot of it or we can actually share with you after the session also. So after hearing from today's panel, I hope you are inspired and would like to step up and co-create solutions with fellow like-minded individuals. Let me now pass on the time to Brian, who will share more about how you can contribute by joining us in Design for Impact 2. Thank you. Brian, take it away.
All right. Right. So thanks, Ming Xiu, thanks, Tasneem, thanks, Yee Huei and Eric, for your very engaging session and being part of D4I. I think we have now a better understanding of Singapore's youth mental health landscape. Before we move on to talk a little bit more about Design for Impact, if you would like to leave us a survey feedback response, please scan this QR code and let us know how can we improve the webinars or how you have enjoyed it. Also, we're cognizant that we didn't finish all the Q&A questions. If you have got any other questions for us or pertaining to Design for Impact as well, you can drop us an email at designforimpact2@gmail.com. So for Design for Impact, from 7th of October to 26th November, we will be running the Design for Impact 2 program. Each team that sign up will be assigned a facilitator to bring you through the entire design journey. So like what Eric said, right, you will be able to learn how to put young people at the center in order to design services around them. You will learn how to apply design thinking to create impactful services for the community. Some efforts will definitely be required just beyond outside these plenary and team sessions to work on your ideas and to improve upon them. And on 3rd of December, 9 teams that will be selected to pitch for at this Design for Impact pitch event. The top 3 winning teams will each receive a funding of $12,000 to implement the solution in the community. From last year, what we have learned that the winning solutions need not be something that's large scale, highly heavy, tech heavy, highly sophisticated digital platforms, but rather something small, simple, and easy to understand and implement, solutions that are suitable for our target audience. Design for Impact is supported by AIC, HPB, and divisions within MOHT this year, which means that you have every opportunity for your idea to really impact practice and policies and to have your ideas piloted at sites which are championed by these agencies. So joining for Design for Impact family also has its advantages. From last year's alumni, they are also part of a growing ecosystem of like-minded innovators coming together to support one another, to connect with one another, to share resources, and to together bring ideas to fruition. So with that, I thank you for joining us today, giving us your time and your evening. If you'd like to know more about Design for Impact or would like to join us on this journey, please scan the QR code on your left, and that's where you'll bring you to a website and register for Design for Impact. Once again, if you'd like to leave a survey response for the webinar, please scan the QR code on the right. And if you've got any other questions for us, for the panelists as well, you can drop us an email at designforimpact2@gmail.com. With that, I thank you so much for your time and for joining us today. I really hope to see you at launch for Design for Impact 2 in 2 weeks' time. Thank you so much. I do see some questions that are coming in. One question asked if only youths can join. No, this Design for Impact is open for the public to join. So anyone that is from the community, anybody at all can just join us on this journey together. Yes. Great, thanks guys. If you have got any other questions, you can please leave it in the chat and we can answer some of the questions as well. Is there a limit to how many groups of participants Design for Impact will be accepted? There is a maximum number of participants as entire events, and the maximum cap is around 180 participants or so. Just to let you know, each team, so if you want to sign up as a team, you can, in a team of 5, maximum 6 people. And you can also sign up as individuals or as pairs, and we'll match you up with other people that are participating. Can a lived experience peer join in for Design for Impact? Definitely, why not? Okay, Eric has a difficult one. Who owns the idea and IP? We will explore that once the idea is out, and then we'll discuss this together with the organizers to see how that goes. It depends on who is going to take on and implement it in the end as well. Yeah. Okay. If not, then thanks for joining us for Design for Impact 2 webinar series. And hopefully we'll see you guys at Design for Impact launch in 2 weeks' time. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, all the panelists and the moderator as well. Thank you for your time. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.